My daughter screamed in front of everyone that I either apologize to her mother-in-law or get out of her house. All eyes were fixed on me, waiting to see me cry, beg, break. But I just stood up slowly from that uncomfortable chair where they had seated me at the back of the room far from the main table. I walked with my back straight until I was standing in front of Catherine, that woman with thin lips and an icy stare who had decided from day one that I wasn't good enough for her family. She smirked, certain I was going to kneel, but I didn't. I looked her directly in the eyes and said just one sentence. The silence fell like a concrete slab, and in the minutes that followed, the perfect life everyone thought they had began to crumble like a house of cards in the rain. Before we continue, please subscribe to the Granny's Voice channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are watching from now. We might give you a shout out in our next video. Today's shout out goes to Carla from New Jersey. Thank you for being part of this great family. Now, let me tell you what happened that day. My name is Elena Martinez. I am 69 years old, and this is the story of how I was erased from my own family. It all started 3 weeks earlier on a Thursday afternoon. I was in my small kitchen making vegetable soup when I looked at the calendar hanging on the wall. That day was my youngest granddaughter's birthday. Lily, she was turning 7. I had bought her gift 2 weeks earlier, a pink dress with embroidered flowers that she had seen in a store window, and that cost me almost half of my Social Security check. I wrapped it in shiny paper with a white bow. I left it on the dining room table, ready to go. I waited all day for a call, a text, something. Natalie, my daughter, always organized parties for the kids. She always let me know in advance. But that day, my phone remained silent. Not a single ring, not one notification. I checked 2, 3, 5 times. Nothing. I thought that maybe she was busy, that she would call me later, that maybe the party was on the weekend. But at 8 o'clock in the evening, when it was already dark and I was sitting in front of the television without really seeing it, I opened my phone to check one last time. I went on social media, something I rarely do because I don't really understand how those things work. And there it was, the first post on my screen. Natalie had uploaded photos 2 hours earlier, more than 20 photographs. Lily's party. Gold and white balloons. A long table decorated with lace tablecloths. 3-tiered cakes. Children running around in party hats. Adults chatting with glasses in their hands. And in the center of it all, my granddaughter Lily in a new cream-colored dress opening presents. She was smiling so wide you could see all her teeth. Natalie was behind her hugging her. Marcus, my son-in-law, appeared in several photos, toasting with other men in suits. Natalie's mother-in-law, Catherine, was sitting in the main spot. Like a queen surveying her kingdom. I went through each photo slowly. I looked for my face. I looked for an empty space where I should have been, but there was nothing. I wasn't at that party. No one had invited me. No one had called me. No one had told me. They simply erased me. As if I had never existed. As if I weren't the grandmother. As if 69 years of life, of sacrifice, of love given without conditions wasn't worth even a single phone call. The gift was still on my table. The pink dress with embroidered flowers that my granddaughter was never going to wear because I was never going to be able to give it to her. Because I didn't exist in this new life my daughter had built. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed seated in the dark living room with my hands crossed in my lap trying to understand. I tried to find a logical explanation. Maybe Natalie lost my number. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. Maybe she thought I was sick and didn't want to bother me. I looked for every possible reason to justify the unjustifiable. But deep down in that place where we keep the truths we don't want to accept, I already knew this wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. The next day, I called Natalie. Ring after ring, nothing. I sent a text message, something that's very hard for me because my fingers are clumsy with those little keys. I wrote letter by letter. Honey, I saw the pictures from Lily's party. Why didn't you tell me? 4 hours passed before she responded. Just 2 words. Sorry, Mom. Nothing more. No explanation, no call, no real apology, just 2 empty words sent to silence my pain. I tried calling her again that week and the next. Always busy, always in a hurry. Always with a perfect excuse. I'm in a meeting, Mom. The kids have classes. Marcus has an important engagement. Every sentence was another brick in the wall they were building between us. Then I started to remember, to see clearly things I had ignored before. I started to notice a pattern, a sequence, a silent strategy of exclusion that had been going on for months, maybe years, right in front of my eyes without me wanting to see it. Last Christmas, for example, Natalie told me they would spend the holidays at her in-laws' house in the neighboring city. She said it was more comfortable for the children, that the house was bigger, that Catherine had already organized everything. I spent Christmas Eve alone, eating Christmas cookies in front of the television, watching old movies. Meanwhile, they were eating turkey and toasting with champagne under decorative lights. I knew because again, the photos appeared on social media. Everyone was there, the perfect family, except for me. I also remembered Mother's Day from that year. Natalie sent me flowers by delivery, red roses with a printed card that said, "For the best mom." But she didn't come to see me. She didn't call me. We didn't even share a coffee. Just soulless flowers and a voiceless card. Meanwhile, I found out later that same day, she had organized a lunch at a fancy restaurant. Catherine, Marcus, the children, and several relatives from his side were there. A big celebration. Only that celebration was for the other mother, not for me. And 6 months ago, when my oldest grandson, Oliver, turned 10, they told me the party had been cancelled because the boy was sick. Natalie texted me that morning. "Oliver has a fever, Mom. There won't be a party. We'll celebrate another day." I made homemade chicken soup and went to her house to bring it. I rang the doorbell. No one answered. I insisted. Silence. I left the thermos with the soup at the door and left, worried. 2 days later, I saw the photographs. Oliver was never sick. The party happened in a private event hall with clowns, candy tables, and more than 50 guests. Everyone except me. Every memory was a wound reopening. Every lie was a confirmation. I hadn't been forgotten by accident. I had been erased intentionally, with planning, coldly. And now, sitting in my empty living room with the phone turned off on the table and the undelivered gift stored in the closet, I finally accepted it. My daughter no longer wanted me in her life. And someone else had taken my place. The memories started coming like waves, one after another, each one clearer than the last. And with each one, the truth became sharper, more painful, more impossible to deny. I remembered the day Natalie introduced me to Marcus. It was 12 years ago. She came to my house radiant, holding the hand of a tall man in an impeccable suit and a polite smile. "Mom, this is Marcus," she told me with an excitement I hadn't seen in her in years. I welcomed them with coffee and homemade bread. Marcus was kind. We talked about a little bit of everything. I liked him. But 2 weeks later, when Natalie came to visit me alone, I noticed something different about her. She was nervous. She was biting her lower lip just like when she was a little girl and had done something wrong. Finally, she spoke. "Mom, Marcus's family is different. They have money, lots of properties. His mother, Catherine, is very strict about appearances." I nodded, not quite understanding where she was going. Then she continued, "Maybe it would be better if when you come to visit me, you let me know beforehand, just so I'm prepared." Prepared. That word hung in the air. Prepared for what? I didn't say it at the time, but now I understood. Prepared to hide me. Months later came the wedding. A grand ceremony in an elegant hall that cost more than $30,000, according to what I heard people commenting. I was there, of course, but they sat me at a table in the back near the kitchen next to people I didn't know. The main table was for Marcus's family. Catherine presided like an empress in a pearl-colored dress and a necklace of real pearls. The groom's parents, the important aunts and uncles, the cousins, everyone there in the place of honor. And me, the mother of the bride, hidden where no one could see me too much. Natalie stopped by my table only once during the entire night. She gave me a quick kiss on the cheek and said, "Thanks for coming, Mom." As if I were just another guest. As if I weren't the woman who brought her into the world. The woman who worked double shifts at the textile factory for 15 years to pay for the private school she wanted to attend. The woman who sold the only gold ring she had, an inheritance from my mother to buy her her first car when she turned 18. But that night, I said nothing. I smiled. I clapped. I took photos when they asked me to. And at the end, when everyone left, I took the bus back home while they got into a white limousine heading to the 5-star hotel where they would spend their first night as husband and wife. Then came the first grandchild, Oliver. When Natalie called me from the hospital to tell me he had been born, I cried with happiness. I took a cab, something I almost never do because it's expensive, and went straight to meet him. He was tiny, red, with his fists clenched. Perfect. I stayed for 2 hours. I held Oliver. I sang him a lullaby that my grandmother used to sing to me. Natalie smiled tiredly from the bed. Everything seemed fine. But when it was time for the official visit, Marcus and Catherine came in with a bouquet of white roses so large it barely fit through the door. Catherine looked at me and her expression changed. She didn't say anything directly, but her body language was clear. I was in the way. I stood up, gave Natalie a kiss, and left. No one asked me to stay. During Oliver's first year of life, I would go visit him every 2 weeks. I always brought something, a toy, clothes I knitted at night, homemade food, but the visits started getting shorter. Natalie always had something to do. Mom, we have a pediatrician appointment today. My mother-in-law is coming for lunch today. Marcus has a business dinner tonight, and I need to get ready. Little by little, my visits went from every 2 weeks to once a month, then every 2 months, then only on special occasions and finally only when I insisted so much that it was impossible to refuse me. I also remembered the time I moved apartments 3 years ago. The building where I lived was going to be demolished and I had to find another place. It was an exhausting process for a woman my age. Heavy boxes, old furniture, memories of a lifetime packed into bags and cardboard. I asked Natalie for help. Honey, could you come over this Saturday? Even for just a few hours. I can't do all this alone. It took her 2 days to answer my message. When she did, it was brief. Mom, this weekend is Oliver's soccer tournament. I can't miss it. But I can send you money to hire someone. She sent me $200. I hired 2 young men from the neighborhood who helped me carry the things. They were kind and quick, but they weren't my daughter. They weren't the little girl I carried in my arms. The girl I taught to walk, to read, to dream. That girl now paid me with money so she wouldn't have to come. And while I was unpacking alone in my new apartment, smaller and darker than the last, I saw on social media that Natalie had posted photos of the tournament, Oliver in his uniform, Marcus clapping from the stands, and Catherine, always Catherine, sitting in the front row with a thermos of coffee and a blanket over her legs. Everyone supporting the boy, all together, all happy, a perfect family with no space for me. There was another moment that came back to my memory with brutal clarity. The day Lily, my youngest granddaughter, had her first communion. I had spent $300 on a beautiful white dress for her. I bought it at the best store I could afford with lace and tiny pearls sewn by hand on the collar. I went to the church. I watched the ceremony from the back because I arrived late. When it ended, everyone went outside to take pictures on the steps. I waited for my turn. I was carrying a bag with the wrapped dress. I wanted to give it to her in person to see her little face light up, but when I got closer, Catherine was organizing the photographs. Just the immediate family first, she said in a firm voice. Marcus, Natalie, Oliver, and Lily posed. Then she called the paternal grandparents. Then the aunts and uncles from Marcus's side. The photos went on and on. I waited to the side with my bag in my hands, feeling smaller and smaller. Finally, I approached. Natalie, can I take a picture with Lily? My daughter looked at me uncomfortably. Catherine intervened before she could answer. Of course, Mrs. Martinez, but quickly because we're heading to the reception and we can't be late. Mrs. Martinez, that's what she called me. As if I were a stranger, as if I weren't the grandmother of the girl who had just received her first communion. I took one picture, just one. Quick. Lily smiled at the camera, but her eyes were searching for her other grandmother. I gave her my gift. She received it politely and immediately passed it to her mother. She didn't even open it. Then everyone left for the reception hall in 3 cars. No one offered me a ride. "Mom, the cars are full," Natalie told me without looking me in the eye. "You can take a cab. I'll reimburse you later." She never reimbursed me, and I never asked her for it. I took the bus back home. I didn't go to the celebration. I didn't have the strength. I didn't have the heart. I sat in my empty living room and cried like I hadn't cried since my husband died. I cried for the girl I raised, for the woman she had become, for the family I was losing without being able to do anything to stop it. All those memories now made sense. They weren't coincidences. They weren't misunderstandings. They were pieces of a plan, a silent, methodical plan to erase me, to replace me, to act as if I had never existed in the life of my daughter and my grandchildren. And the architect of that plan had a first and last name. Catherine Sterling, the woman who from the beginning saw in me everything she despised: poverty, simplicity, humble origins, working hands instead of soft hands, a woman who arrived on foot instead of in a car, a woman who didn't know how to use the correct silverware at formal dinners, a woman who was not worthy of being near her perfect family. And my daughter, my own blood, had chosen Catherine's side. She had chosen comfort, money, status, the easy life. And to get it, she had to sacrifice something. She had to sacrifice me. The acceptance came on a Sunday morning. I woke up early as always. I made coffee. I sat by the window of my small living room and looked at the empty street. Everything was quiet. And in that silence, I finally stopped making excuses. My daughter had erased me. Not by accident, not by oversight, but by choice. Because my presence was inconvenient. Because I didn't fit into the perfect world she had built with Marcus and his family. Because Catherine had decided I wasn't good enough. And Natalie had accepted that sentence without protest. I didn't cry. I had no tears left. I just felt an enormous weight in my chest, as if someone had placed a stone on my heart, and I couldn't remove it. Breathing became difficult. Not from illness, but from the emotional burden of accepting that the person I loved most in this world no longer wanted me in her life. I picked up my phone. I turned it on. I opened the photo gallery. There they all were. Natalie as a baby in my arms. Natalie on her first day of school. Natalie on her graduation day hugging me tight and whispering in my ear, "Everything I am is thanks to you, Mom." Natalie at her wedding in that white dress that cost $8,000 and that I admired from afar. Natalie holding newborn Oliver while I looked over her shoulder. Every photo was a memory of what we were, of what we no longer were. I closed the gallery. I turned off the phone and I made a decision. I was no longer going to beg. I was no longer going to grovel for a place in my daughter's life. I was no longer going to send messages hoping for replies that never came. If she had decided to erase me, I was going to accept it. But not silently, not without understanding why first, not without knowing the whole truth. I spent the next few days in a strange calm. It wasn't peace. It was more of a cold resignation. I got up every morning. I made my breakfast. I did my chores. I went for a walk in the park as I always did. But I was doing everything on autopilot. My body was moving, but my mind was somewhere else. It was processing. It was digesting the abandonment. One afternoon, while cleaning my small closet, I found an old shoe box on the top shelf. I carefully took it down. Inside were letters. Letters Natalie wrote to me when she was a teenager and went to a summer camp. It was 5 days away from home, but she wrote to me every single one of those days. I opened the first letter. Her handwriting was round and clear. "Mom, I miss you so much. The food here isn't like yours. Last night I dreamed I was at home eating your empanadas. I love you, Natalie." I read the second and the third. They all said the same thing in different ways. How much she missed me. How much she needed me. How much she loved me. What happened to that girl? Where did that love go? At what point did I stop being important to her? I put the letters away again. I closed the box. I returned it to the shelf. And in that moment, I knew I needed answers. I couldn't live with the doubt. I couldn't just disappear without knowing what really destroyed the relationship with my daughter. That night, I made a decision. I was going to watch. I was going to listen. I was going to pay attention to everything I had ignored before. And if there was something else behind all of this, something darker, something deeper than just the influence of a manipulative mother-in-law, I was going to find it out. I started by checking social media more carefully. Not to torture myself by looking at photos of the happy family, but to look for patterns, details, things that didn't add up. And it didn't take me long to find something strange. In Natalie's recent posts, there was a man who appeared frequently. It wasn't Marcus. It was someone younger, maybe 35 years old. Dark hair, always well-dressed. In one photo, he was in the backyard of Natalie's house during a barbecue. In another, he was at Oliver's birthday. In one more, he appeared in the background of a family photo taken at the beach. I read the comments. No one asked who he was, as if everyone knew him, as if it were normal for him to be there. I zoomed in on one of the photos. The man had his hand resting on Marcus's shoulder. They seemed close. Friends, maybe business partners. I filed that information away in my mind. I didn't know if it meant anything, but it was a detail, and details matter. I also noticed something else. In several recent posts, Catherine appeared wearing new jewelry, a diamond necklace, large gold earrings, a watch that looked very expensive, and in a photo where they were all dining at a fancy restaurant, I saw that Marcus was wearing a different watch, too. One that probably cost more than what I earned in an entire year. Where was all this money coming from? Marcus had a good job. I knew that he was a manager at a real estate firm, but enough for thousands of dollars in jewelry and brand name watches. Maybe so. Maybe I was just looking for problems where there were none. But something inside me wasn't convinced. There was something that didn't add up. Something my gut told me I should investigate. 2 weeks passed. I continued my silent routine. I didn't call Natalie. I didn't send messages. I didn't beg for attention. I just watched from afar like a ghost in my own family's life. And then something happened that changed everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was watering the plants on my small balcony when my apartment doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I rarely had visitors. I carefully walked down the stairs and opened the door. In front of me was a man, tall, about 50 years old. He was wearing dark pants and a white shirt. He was holding a manila envelope in his hand. He looked at me seriously. "Mrs. Elena Martinez?" he asked in a deep voice. "Yes, that's me," I replied, feeling my heart start to beat faster. "My name is James Cooper. I'm a private investigator," he paused. "I need to talk to you about your son-in-law, Marcus, and about the Sterling family." I stood frozen. The air seemed to have stopped. The man in front of me didn't seem dangerous. He seemed tired. He seemed like someone carrying heavy information who needed to share it. "What do you mean?" My voice came out weaker than I expected. James looked from side to side as if checking that no one was listening. "Can we talk inside? It's important, and I'd prefer this conversation to be private." I hesitated. I didn't know this man. He could be anyone, but something in his eyes told me he was serious, that what he had to tell me was real, and that it was probably going to change everything I thought I knew. I opened the door completely and let him pass. James entered my small living room. He looked around briefly and then sat on the sofa when I indicated he should. I sat across from him in my usual chair by the window. My hands were trembling slightly. I clasped them in my lap to control them. "Mrs. Martinez," James began placing the manila envelope on the coffee table between us. 3 months ago, a businessman's wife hired me to investigate her husband. She suspected he was involved in shady dealings. During that investigation, I uncovered a money laundering network involving several people. And one of those people is Marcus, your son-in-law. I felt as if I had been punched in the stomach. "What are you saying? Marcus isn't just a real estate manager. He's part of an operation that uses shell properties to launder money from illegal sources. And the matriarch behind it all is Catherine Sterling. She coordinates everything. Marcus is just a piece in her game." I couldn't breathe. The words were entering my ears, but my brain refused to process them. "No, it can't be. Natalie, my daughter, your daughter probably knows nothing," James said in a softer voice. Or at least she didn't until recently. But Catherine knows, and she has been building this operation for years. The money you see in the jewelry, the cars, the big house, it doesn't just come from Marcus's honest work. It comes from illegal transactions. He opened the envelope. He took out several documents, photographs, records, names, and numbers that I didn't fully understand, but that looked official. They looked real. Why are you telling me this? I asked, feeling tears start to well up in my eyes. Because you are the only person in that family who isn't under Catherine's control. You are the only one who can do something without her finding out immediately. And why? He paused. Because my client, the woman who hired me, asked me to find someone in the family who could be an ally, someone who deserved to know the truth. I remained silent, looking at the documents on the table, looking at the proof that my daughter's perfect life was a lie built on crimes. And suddenly it all made sense. The exclusion, the distancing, Catherine pushing me away from Natalie. It wasn't just about classism. It was about control. It was to make sure I didn't discover what was happening. It was to keep me far away from the truth. What do you want me to do? I finally asked. James looked at me intently. That's up to you, Mrs. Martinez. I just came to deliver the information. What you do with it is your decision. James left the manila envelope on my table. He stood up slowly, as if the weight of what he had just revealed exhausted him, too. He gave me a card with his name and a phone number. If you need help or have questions, you can call me, he said. But be careful, Mrs. Martinez. Catherine Sterling is not a forgiving woman, and if she finds out you know something, it could be dangerous. I nodded, unable to speak. James walked to the door. Before leaving, he stopped and looked at me one last time. Your daughter needs to know the truth. Even if it hurts, even if it destroys everything, the truth is always better than living in a lie. The door closed behind him. I was left alone in my living room, staring at the envelope as if it were a bomb that could explode at any moment. Hours passed before I could move. Finally, as the sun began to set and the room filled with shadows, I turned on the lamp and opened the envelope completely. I took out everything inside. Legal documents, photographs of properties, bank records, names of shell companies, and in the midst of it all, photographs of Marcus meeting with men who were clearly not normal real estate clients. One photo showed Marcus handing an envelope to a rough-looking man in a building's parking garage. Another showed Catherine leaving a bank with a woman who, according to James's notes, was known for her connections to organized crime. There were also documents showing bank transfers, enormous amounts, $50,000, $100,000, $200,000 moving from one account to another, from one company to another, all connected in some way to Catherine or Marcus. And then I saw something that chilled my blood. Among the documents was a property deed, a house registered in the name of Natalie Martinez, my daughter. The house where she lived with Marcus and the children, but the purchase date didn't match what she had told me. She told me they had bought that house 5 years ago with a bank loan and their savings. But according to this document, the house had been purchased 7 years ago. And the money didn't come from a bank. It came from a direct transfer from a company called Sterling Investments, a company that, according to James's notes, was a front for money laundering. My daughter was living in a house bought with dirty money. Did she know? Did she have any idea where that money really came from? Or had Catherine and Marcus kept her in the dark to protect her or to use her? I felt nauseous. I got up and went to the bathroom. I splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red. My skin looked pale. I looked 10 years older than I was. But amidst that pain, amidst that shock, something else began to grow inside me. It wasn't rage. It wasn't hatred. It was determination. A cold, clear certainty that I could not stay silent, that I could not let this continue. My daughter was in danger. Even if she didn't know it, even if she had abandoned me, even if she had erased me from her life, she was still my daughter and I was still her mother. And mothers protect their children always, no matter what. I went back to the living room. I organized all the documents carefully. I read them one by one, trying to understand every detail. I wasn't a lawyer. I wasn't an investigator, but I wasn't stupid either. 70 years of life had taught me to recognize when something was wrong. And this was very wrong. I picked up my phone. I thought about calling Natalie, about telling her everything immediately. But I stopped. If I called her now, scared and without a plan, she might not believe me. She might think I was making things up out of spite. She might tell Marcus. And if Marcus told Catherine, everything would fall apart before I could do anything. No, I needed to be smart. I needed more solid proof. I needed a plan. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my chair with the documents in my lap, thinking, remembering, analyzing every conversation I'd had with Natalie in recent years. Every time she mentioned money, every time she talked about Marcus's investments, every time she mentioned Catherine and her financial advice. The next day, early in the morning, I called the number James had given me. He answered on the third ring. Mrs. Martinez, he said as if he had been expecting my call. I need more information, I said without greetings or pleasantries. I need to know exactly what's happening. Everything, every detail. There was a brief silence. Then James spoke. Are you sure? Once you know everything, you can't forget it. You can't pretend you don't know. I'm sure. All right. Can you come to my office this afternoon? I have more documents I couldn't bring you yesterday. And there are things I need to explain in person. Tell me where. He gave me an address in the city center, 40 minutes by bus from my apartment. We agreed to meet at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I hung up the phone. I showered. I got dressed in simple but presentable clothes, grey pants, and a white blouse. I pulled my hair back into a low bun. I looked at myself in the mirror one last time before leaving, and I saw something in my eyes I hadn't seen in months. Purpose. James's office was in an old 3-story building. I climbed the stairs slowly, holding on to the metal railing. On the second floor, I found a door with a small plaque that said, James Cooper, Private Investigations. I knocked. The door opened almost immediately. James greeted me with a serious expression and invited me in. The office was small, a desk cluttered with papers, an old computer, metal filing cabinets against the wall. It smelled like coffee and old paper. Please sit down, James said, pointing to a chair in front of his desk. I sat down. He settled in on the other side and pulled a thick folder from one of the drawers. Mrs. Martinez, what I'm about to show you is serious. Very serious. Catherine Sterling has been building this operation for over 15 years. She started small with legitimate properties, but 10 years ago, she partnered with dangerous people who needed to launder money from illegal activities. She offered them a service. She bought properties in the names of shell companies, resold them, moved the money, cleaned it, and kept a 20% commission on each transaction. He opened the folder. He showed me more photographs, more documents, fake contracts, inflated invoices, all meticulously organized. Marcus got into the business 7 years ago, right after marrying your daughter. Catherine recruited him. She promised him wealth, status, a life he could never have had working honestly. And he accepted. And Natalie, I asked, my voice trembling. Does my daughter know? James shook his head slowly. I don't think so. At least not everything. Catherine is very careful. She keeps Natalie busy with the children, with the social life, with appearances. She uses her as a facade, a perfect family, a devoted wife, well-behaved children, all so that no one suspects what's really happening behind the curtains. I closed my eyes. I felt like tears wanted to come out, but I held them back. It wasn't the time to cry. It was the time to act. What can I do? I asked. How can I protect my daughter? James looked at me with something resembling compassion. First, you need copies of all this. I'll give you a USB drive with all the digital information. Keep it in a safe place. Second, you need direct evidence. Something Natalie can't deny. Something that will force her to see the truth. How do I get that? That, James said, requires you to go into the house to look, to find the documents that Marcus surely keeps in his private office. The authorities need physical proof to act, and I can't enter that house, but you can. You're the grandmother. You have a reason to be there. I fell silent, processing, understanding what he was asking of me. Go into my daughter's house. Search in secret. Steal documents. Betray her trust, even though she had already betrayed mine first. How much time do I have? I asked. Not much. My sources tell me the authorities are close. Very close. If they catch Marcus and Catherine before Natalie knows the truth, she could get trapped, too. She could lose everything. The children could be left without parents. You have to act fast. I took a deep breath. I felt the weight of that responsibility fall onto my shoulders. But I also felt something else. A clarity I hadn't had in a long time. All right, I said finally. I'll do it. James handed me a small USB drive and a handwritten list of the specific documents I should look for. Invoices, contracts, transfer records, anything with the Sterling Investments letterhead or with Catherine's signature. Be careful, he warned me as I put everything in my purse. If Marcus or Catherine suspect anything, they could act fast and not in a kind way. I left that office with my heart beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. The bus ride back felt endless. Every red light, every stop, every minute that passed was another minute to plan what I had to do. I got to my apartment as the sun was beginning to set. I sat in my chair by the window and took out my phone. I looked at Natalie's name in my contacts. My fingers trembled over the screen. Finally, I gathered the courage and dialed. Ring 234. I thought she wouldn't answer, but on the fifth ring, I heard her voice. Mom, she sounded surprised. I hadn't called her in weeks. Hi, honey, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. How is everyone? Fine. Busy as always. Did something happen? No, nothing bad. I just wanted to hear your voice. And I paused, preparing the words I had rehearsed on the bus. I was thinking, I'd like to see the kids. It's been a long time. Could I visit them tomorrow? Just for a little while. Bring them something to eat. There was an uncomfortable silence on the other end. I could imagine her biting her lip, looking for an excuse. Tomorrow is complicated, Mom. Oliver has practice and Lily has her piano lesson. Then the day after tomorrow or whenever you can. Please, Natalie. I just want to see them for a moment. I let my voice sound tired, vulnerable. I wasn't acting. I truly felt that way. Another silence, then a sigh. All right. The day after tomorrow, but just for a little while. Okay. Marcus has an important meeting in the afternoon, and I need the house to be quiet. Thank you, honey. I promise I won't be any trouble. We hung up. I stared at the phone in my hand. 2 days. I had 2 days to prepare, to plan every move, to make sure that when I entered that house, I could get what I needed without raising suspicion. I barely slept that night. I mentally reviewed the layout of Natalie's house. I had only visited a few times, but I remembered the basics: the large living room, the modern kitchen, the stairs leading to the second floor, and upstairs, the hallway with the bedrooms, the kids' rooms, the master bedroom, and at the end of the hall, Marcus's office. That room where he spent hours with the door closed, according to what Natalie had told me once. That's where I had to go. That's where the documents were, the proof, the truth. The next day, I went to the market. I bought ingredients to make empanadas, Oliver and Lily's favorite. I also bought natural juice and some fruit. Everything seemed normal. A grandmother preparing food for her grandchildren. No one would have guessed what I was really planning. I spent the whole afternoon cooking. My hands worked automatically, kneading, filling, sealing each empanada with care. But my mind was elsewhere, going over the plan again and again, looking for flaws, anticipating problems. The day arrived. I woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning. I showered. I dressed in comfortable clothes, black pants, and a soft cream-colored blouse. I combed my hair back. I put the USB drive in the inner pocket of my purse along with my phone on silent mode. At 10 o'clock in the morning, I was on the bus heading to Natalie's house. The trip took 40 minutes. I used that time to calm my nerves, to breathe deeply, to remind myself why I was doing this. I arrived at 10:50. The house was in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Large houses with manicured lawns, expensive cars parked in the driveways, a world completely different from mine. I rang the doorbell. I heard quick footsteps approaching. The door opened and there was Lily, my youngest granddaughter. Her hair was in 2 pigtails. She was wearing a yellow dress with flowers. "Grandma," she shouted with genuine excitement. She threw herself into my arms. I felt my heart break. How long had it been since she hugged me like that? "Hello, my love," I said, kissing her head. "I missed you so much." Natalie appeared behind her. She was wearing jeans and a white blouse. She looked good, rested, happy, even, as if she didn't have a single worry in the world. "Hi, Mom," she said with a polite smile. "Come in." I entered, carrying my purse and a thermal bag with the empanadas. The house smelled like pine cleaner. Everything was impeccably tidy. Modern furniture, shiny hardwood floors, expensive paintings on the walls. "I brought empanadas for the kids," I said, lifting the bag. "Freshly made this morning." "That's sweet, Mom." "Thank you." Natalie took the bag and carried it to the kitchen. Lily took my hand and led me to the living room. "Grandma, come see my drawings. I made one of you." I sat on the sofa while Lily ran upstairs to get her drawings. Oliver appeared from the hallway. He was 11 now, taller, looking more like his father. "Hi, Grandma," he said with less enthusiasm than his sister, but at least he greeted me. "Hello, Oliver. How's school?" "Fine," a short answer. Typical for his age. He sat on the other sofa and pulled out his phone. Natalie returned from the kitchen. "Do you want some coffee, Mom?" "Yes, please." She disappeared again. I looked around. I searched discreetly. The staircase was to my right. The second floor was quiet. Was Marcus upstairs? Was he home? "Is Marcus working?" I asked aloud, trying to sound casual. "He left early," Natalie answered from the kitchen. "He had a meeting with some clients. He'll be back around 3. "Perfect." That gave me time. Lily came down with a folder full of drawings. She sat next to me and began to show me each one. I admired them with genuine affection. She had drawn the whole family. Marcus, Natalie, Oliver, herself, and in one of the drawings in a small corner was me, separated from the rest, alone. "This is you, Grandma," Lily said, pointing to the figure. "I drew you at your house, because you almost never come here." Her words were innocent, without malice, but they hurt like a direct blow to the heart. "It's beautiful, my love," I managed to say. "Can I keep it?" "Yes, it's for you." Natalie returned with 2 cups of coffee. She handed me one. I took a sip. It was hot, strong. I needed that caffeine to stay alert. We spent the next hour chatting. Well, mostly I listened while the children talked about school, their friends, their activities. Natalie chimed in from time to time, correcting something or adding details. Everything seemed normal, a common family visit. But I was waiting for the moment, the opportunity. It came at 12:30. Natalie stood up. "Kids, go wash your hands. It's time for lunch." She turned to me. "Mom, are you staying to eat?" "I made pasta." "I'd love to." Lily and Oliver ran up the stairs. Natalie went to the kitchen and I seized that moment of solitude. I got up from the sofa. I walked toward the stairs with quiet steps. I went up slowly, holding the railing. The second floor had a long hallway, 3 doors on the left, 2 on the right. At the end, a closed door. Marcus's office. I heard water running in one of the bathrooms. The kids washing their hands. I heard Natalie moving pots in the kitchen below. I had seconds. Just seconds. I walked to the end of the hall. I turned the knob of the office. It wasn't locked. The door opened without a sound. I went in. I closed it behind me carefully. My heart was beating so hard I thought I was going to faint, but I couldn't stop now. The office was small. A dark wood desk, a computer, shelves full of binders, a metal filing cabinet in the corner. I went straight to the desk. I opened the first drawer. Documents, invoices, nothing relevant. Second drawer, more documents. Property agreements. Legitimate properties. Third drawer, locked. Damn it. I looked around for the key. Nothing. Then I remembered something James had told me. People always hide important keys nearby. Under something, behind something. I checked under the desk. Nothing. I lifted the computer keyboard. There it was. A small key taped underneath. I peeled it off carefully. I inserted it into the lock, turned, click, it opened. Inside was a thick folder. I pulled it out. I opened it. And there it was. Everything. Contracts with fake names, bank transfers, receipts for payments to companies that didn't exist. And in the center, documents signed by Catherine Sterling. I took out my phone. I took pictures of every page, one after another, quickly, but making sure they were clear. Then I heard footsteps on the stairs. My heart stopped. The steps were coming up slowly. They weren't the kids. It was Natalie. Mom. Her voice came from the hallway. Are you upstairs? I quickly put my phone in my pocket. I closed the folder. I put it back in the drawer. I locked the drawer, but I didn't have time to tape the key back under the keyboard. I shoved it into my other pocket. The footsteps were getting closer. I looked around for an excuse. Anything to justify my presence in that office. The door opened. Natalie appeared in the doorway. She looked at me with surprise and something else. Distrust. What are you doing in here, Mom? I'm sorry, honey. I was looking for the bathroom and got the wrong door. My voice sounded shaky, unconvincing even to myself. Natalie narrowed her eyes. The bathroom is 2 doors back. You know this is Marcus's office. You shouldn't be in here. You're right. Forgive me. I walked toward the door. Natalie didn't move immediately. She was watching me as if trying to read my mind. Finally, she stepped aside to let me pass. We went down the stairs together in silence. The tension was palpable. We reached the dining room where the children were already seated waiting. Lily was smiling. Oliver was still on his phone. Natalie served the pasta. I sat down and tried to eat, but every bite was hard to swallow. My mind was on the key in my pocket, on the photographs on my phone, on Natalie's gaze, which continued to watch me with too much attention. The lunch passed with forced conversation. The children talked. I responded with monosyllables. Natalie barely touched her food. Something had changed. She knew, or at least she suspected. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I stood up. I should go. I have a doctor's appointment. Are you okay, Mom? Natalie asked, but her tone didn't sound worried. It sounded cautious. Yes, just a routine checkup. I said goodbye to the children. Lily hugged me tight. Oliver raised his hand in a vague gesture of farewell. Natalie walked me to the door. Mom, she said before I left. If you need anything, you just have to ask. You don't have to look for things on your own. I looked her in the eyes. In that moment, I knew she knew exactly what I had done. Or at least she had a strong suspicion. I know, honey. Thank you. I walked to the bus stop with shaky legs. I didn't look back, but I felt Natalie's gaze fixed on my back until I turned the corner. On the bus, I checked my phone. The photographs were there, clear, legible, sufficient proof of everything James had told me. But now I had another problem. Natalie suspected. And if Natalie suspected, she would tell Marcus, and Marcus would tell Catherine. I had to act fast, faster than I had planned. I got to my apartment at 3:30. I immediately called James. He answered on the first ring. I got the photos, I said without preamble. But my daughter suspects something. She found me in Marcus's office. Damn it, James muttered. All right, send me the photos right now. All of them. I'll pass them to the authorities, but you need to prepare for what's coming. What do you mean? I mean, if Catherine finds out you were snooping, she's going to want to neutralize you, and your daughter is going to have to pick a side. I hope she picks the right one. He hung up. I sat there with the phone in my hand, processing his words. Neutralize me. What did that mean exactly? Threats? Something worse. I sent all the photographs to James by message. Then I backed them up on the USB drive he had given me. I hid the USB drive inside an old shoebox in the back of my closet under clothes I never wore. The next 2 days were the longest of my life. I waited. I checked my phone constantly. I waited for Natalie to call, for Marcus to show up at my door, for someone to do something. But everything was silent. Then on the 3rd day in the morning, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered with my heart racing. Mrs. Elena Martinez, a woman's voice, formal, official. Yes, this is she. This is Detective Sarah Bennett from the State Police. I need you to come down to the station. We have some questions about a case you might have relevant information on. I ran out of air. What case are you talking about? I'd rather not discuss it over the phone. Can you come in this afternoon at 4 o'clock? Yes, I'll be there. She hung up. I sat motionless. This was real. It was all happening. The authorities were acting. And I was in the middle of it all. At 3:30, I left my apartment. I took the bus downtown. The police station was a grey 4-story building. I walked in with my legs trembling. I identified myself at the front desk. They asked me to wait. 15 minutes later, a woman in her 40s with short hair and a dark suit appeared. Mrs. Martinez. I'm Detective Bennett. Please come with me. I followed her down a hallway to a small interrogation room. Table, 2 chairs, a camera in the upper corner. I sat down. The detective sat across from me. Mrs. Martinez. 3 days ago, we received information about a money laundering network. That information included photographs of very specific documents that only someone with access to Marcus's private office could have obtained. She looked at me intently. It was you who took those photographs, wasn't it? I took a deep breath. This was the moment. There was no turning back. Yes, it was me. Why? Because my daughter is married to that man. Because her children are growing up in a house built with dirty money. And because someone had to do something before she got trapped in this, too. The detective nodded. She pulled out a folder. She opened it. Inside were copies of the photographs I had taken along with other documents I didn't recognize. Thanks to your information, we were able to obtain a search warrant. We entered the house this morning. Marcus and Catherine Sterling were arrested 2 hours ago. We found enough evidence to charge them both with money laundering, fraud, and conspiracy. I felt the air leave my lungs. And my daughter. Natalie, your daughter will not be charged. After questioning her, we determined that she had no real knowledge of the illegal activities. She was in shock when we arrived, but legally she's clean. Where is she now? Where are the children? At the house with social services supervising temporarily until the legal situation is resolved. The children are fine. Scared, but fine. I covered my face with my hands. I didn't know whether to cry from relief or pain. My daughter was legally safe, but her life had just exploded into 1,000 pieces. Mrs. Martinez, the detective continued in a softer voice. You did the right thing. I know it doesn't feel like it right now. I know you probably feel like a traitor, but you saved your daughter and your grandchildren from something much worse. Can I see her? Can I see Natalie? The detective hesitated. She specifically asked not to see anyone for now. She's processing everything. Give her time. I nodded. I stood up with difficulty. My legs barely supported me. What happens now? Now we prepare the case. Marcus and Catherine will face trial. Probably prison. The illegally acquired properties will be seized and your daughter will have to rebuild her life. It won't be easy. But at least it will be an honest life. I left the police station in a daze. I had done what I had to do, but I didn't feel victorious. I just felt a huge emptiness in my chest. I got to my apartment after dark. I sat in my chair by the window. I looked at the illuminated city outside. And for the first time in weeks, I cried. I cried for my daughter, for my grandchildren, for the family that had been shattered, for the pain that was coming. But I also cried with relief. Because the truth had finally come to light. And even though it hurt, even though it destroyed everything, the truth was always better than living in a lie. Now all that was left was to wait. To wait for Natalie to be ready to listen, to understand, to perhaps forgive. 5 days passed with no news. 5 days in which my phone remained silent. 5 days in which every minute felt like an hour. I continued my routine mechanically. I got up. I made coffee. I looked out the window. I waited. Then on the 6th day in the afternoon, my phone rang. It was Natalie. My hand trembled as I answered. "Honey. Mom." Her voice sounded broken, tired. "I need to see you. Please come to the house tonight at 7. Are you sure? Please, Mom. I need to understand all this." She hung up before I could reply. I stared at the phone. This was what I had been waiting for. But now that the moment was here, fear paralyzed me. What would she say? Would she hate me? Could she ever forgive me? At 6:30, I left my apartment. The bus ride gave me time to prepare mentally, but no amount of preparation was enough for what I was about to face. I arrived at the house at 5 minutes to 7. There was an unfamiliar car parked outside. The living room lights were on. I rang the doorbell with my heart pounding in my throat. Natalie opened the door. She looked haggard, eyes red and swollen, hair pulled back carelessly. She was wearing sweatpants and an old sweatshirt. I hadn't seen her this destroyed since her father died 10 years ago. "Come in," she said, her voice flat. I entered. The house felt different, colder, emptier, as if the soul had left along with the lies that held it up. In the living room, there were 3 other people. A woman in her 30s in a formal uniform, holding a clipboard. Social services, I assumed, and sitting on the sofa, Oliver and Lily. The children looked at me with confused eyes. "The kids are going to stay with Monica," Natalie said, gesturing to the woman. "Just for tonight, we need to talk without them hearing." Monica stood up. "Come on, kids. Let's go to my house. I made cookies." Lily stood up slowly. She came to me and hugged me. "I love you, Grandma," she whispered. "I love you, too, my love," I replied, my voice breaking. Oliver walked past me without saying anything. But I saw in his eyes that he was scared, too, confused, looking for answers that no one had given him yet. The 3 of them left. The door closed. And then we were alone, Natalie and I, mother and daughter, face to face after years of emotional distance. But this time with no masks, no pretenses, just the raw truth between us. Natalie collapsed onto the sofa. I sat in the armchair across from her. The silence was so thick, I could feel it pressing against my skin. Finally, she spoke. "The police told me it was you. That you took the photos. That you gave them the information that led them to arrest Marcus and Catherine. I didn't deny it. There was no point. Yes, it was me. Why, Mom? Why did you destroy my family?" Her words were like knives. But I remained calm. "I didn't destroy your family, Natalie. It was already destroyed. You just didn't know it. You were living in an illusion built on stolen money and lies. That didn't give you the right to," her voice broke. Tears began to roll down her cheeks. "That didn't give you the right to stick your nose into my life, to come into my house like a thief, to betray my trust. Your trust." I felt something inside me break. "What trust, Natalie? You erased me from your life years ago. You excluded me from your children's parties. You lied to me. You hid me. You treated me as if I were an embarrassment. And now you talk to me about trust." Natalie put her face in her hands. She sobbed. It was a heartbreaking sound. The sound of a woman finally facing all the truths she had been avoiding. "I didn't want to do that to you," she said through her tears. "But Catherine, she convinced me that you didn't fit in. That the kids needed a different environment. That if I wanted this family to succeed, I needed to let go of certain things from the past. Was I a thing from the past? Your own mother. I don't know, Mom. I don't know." I was confused. Marcus promised me a life I had never had. A life without worries, without debts, without struggling. And Catherine seemed to have all the answers. She made me believe she knew best, that she could teach me to be the perfect wife, the perfect mother. And little by little, without realizing it, I left you out. But the kids, Natalie, Lily doesn't even really know me. Oliver barely speaks to me. How could you let that happen? Because I'm a coward, she suddenly shouted. Because instead of defending my own mother, I chose comfort. I chose money. I chose not to make waves. And now everything has gone to hell. And I don't know how to fix any of it. She got up from the sofa. She walked to the window. She stood there, her arms crossed over her chest, staring into the darkness. I took a deep breath. Natalie, did you know where the money was coming from? Did you know what Marcus and Catherine were doing? She shook her head without turning around. No, not everything. I knew Marcus had business I didn't understand, that Catherine handled things she called investments. But every time I asked, they told me not to worry, that it was complicated, that I should just focus on the kids and the house. And I obeyed like a fool. You're not a fool. You were manipulated. It's the same thing, Mom. I was weak enough to let them manipulate me. She turned to face me. Her eyes were red, but there was something else in them, too. Rage. Catherine played me from the beginning. She made me believe she was helping me, that she was polishing me, when in reality she was just using me as a facade. The perfect wife, the perfect children, also no one would suspect what they were really doing. I know. That's why I had to act, because if I didn't, this would have continued and eventually you would have been legally trapped, too. The children would have grown up thinking this was normal. That stealing was okay as long as you had enough money to hide it. Natalie sat back down. She leaned forward, her elbows on her knees. The detective told me Marcus could face up to 20 years in prison. Catherine, too, that all the properties, including this house, will be seized. That there will be nothing left. I'm sorry, honey. Don't be. It's what they deserve. It's what we all deserve for being so blind. She looked up at me. But that doesn't mean I'm not furious with you, too. Mom, you did the right thing. But you did it in the worst possible way. You could have told me. You could have trusted me. Would you have believed me? If I had come to you a week ago and told you your husband was a criminal, would you have believed me? Or would you have believed him? Silence. We both knew the answer. I probably would have believed him, she finally admitted. And then I would have pushed you away even further and Catherine would have used it to make sure you never came back. Exactly. That's why I had to get proof. That's why I had to act in silence because it was the only way to save you. Natalie closed her eyes. The tears were still falling, but now they were quieter, more resigned. So now what, Mom? What am I supposed to do now? I have no house. I have no money. My husband is in jail. The woman I thought was my mentor turns out to be a criminal. And my kids are terrified, not understanding why their life turned into a nightmare overnight. I stood up. I walked over to her. I knelt in front of my daughter and took her hands in mine. They were cold, trembling. Now you rebuild from scratch with the truth. No lies, no facades. And you don't do it alone. You do it with me if you'll let me. If you can forgive me for hurting you, even if it was to save you. Natalie looked at me. Really looked at me. For the first time in years, I saw my daughter. Not the woman she was pretending to be, but the little girl who once hugged me and told me I was her hero. I don't know if I can forgive you yet, Mom, she said, her voice breaking. But I do know that I need you. The kids need you because out of all the liars in my life, you were the only one who had the courage to tell the truth. Even when it hurt, even when it destroyed everything. I hugged her. She let herself be hugged. And there, in that empty living room of a house that would soon no longer be hers, we cried together for everything lost, for everything that was broken, but also for the chance to start over, for real this time. 3 weeks after the arrest, Natalie and the children moved into my apartment. It wasn't large. It wasn't luxurious. But it was honest. And right then, that was the only thing that mattered. The house they lived in was seized by the authorities. Everything inside it, too. The expensive furniture, the designer clothes, the toys, all bought with dirty money, all lost. Natalie was only able to take the kids' basic clothing and a few personal items that had no monetary value. Photographs, drawings, memories from when life still made sense. The first few days were difficult. Oliver was angry at the world. He didn't want to talk. He didn't want to eat. He would lock himself in the small room he now shared with his sister and stare at the wall for hours. Lily cried at night. She asked for her dad. She asked why they didn't live in their house anymore. She asked if she had done something wrong. Natalie tried to explain it to them in words they could understand. That their dad had made mistakes. That sometimes adults do bad things without thinking about the consequences. That none of this was their fault. But words weren't enough to heal the pain of two children who had just watched their world explode. I did what I could. I cooked their favorite meals. I read them stories before bed. I sat with Oliver in silence when he didn't want to talk. I held Lily when she woke up crying in the middle of the night. Small gestures that couldn't fix everything, but that at least showed them they weren't alone. Natalie got a job at a coffee shop 2 blocks from my apartment. It wasn't much. $9 an hour, 8-hour shifts on her feet, serving coffee and cleaning tables. Nothing like the life of luxury she had had, but it was honest money, and that meant everything. I watched her leave every morning at 6 o'clock in her simple uniform and her hair pulled back. She returned at 3 o'clock in the afternoon with swollen feet and a tired body, but she never complained. She never said it was unfair. She just did what she had to do. One afternoon, while she was resting on the sofa after work, I sat next to her. "I'm proud of you," I told her. She looked at me surprised. "Why?" "I lost everything, Mom. I'm a failure." "No, you're a survivor. And that's much more valuable than any big house or expensive car." She didn't reply, but I saw her eyes well up. She put her head on my shoulder like when she was a little girl. And we stayed like that in silence as the sun began to set outside. The trial for Marcus and Catherine was scheduled for 6 months later. Natalie would have to testify, not as a defendant, but as a witness. The lawyers explained that her testimony was important, that it would help establish the pattern of manipulation, that it would show how Catherine controlled everything from the shadows. "I don't know if I can do it," she told me one night while the kids were sleeping. "I don't know if I can stand up in front of Marcus and tell everyone how blind I was." "You can," I assured her, "because you're not the same woman you were a month ago. That woman was afraid of the truth. You're not anymore." Little by little, the children began to adapt. Oliver started talking more. Not much, but at least he would answer when asked something. Lily became intensely attached to me. She followed me all over the apartment. She wanted to help me cook. She wanted me to teach her to sew like I knew how. She wanted to learn everything her other grandmother had never taught her. One afternoon while we were making cookies together, Lily asked me, "Grandma, why was Grandma Catherine mean?" I paused. I chose my words carefully. She wasn't mean, my love. She was just confused. She thought money was more important than family. And when you think like that, you do things that hurt the people you love. You'll never hurt us, right? Never on purpose, my sweet, and if I ever do by accident, I promise I will ask for your forgiveness. She seemed satisfied and continued kneading the dough with her small flour-covered hands. Natalie began to heal, too. Slowly, she sought professional help, a free therapist at a community clinic. She went twice a week. At first, she didn't want to talk about those sessions, but after a few weeks, she started to share. "The therapist says I was a victim of psychological abuse," she told me one night. "She says Catherine used control and manipulation tactics typical of abusers, that she intentionally isolated me from you to have more power over me. And how does knowing that make you feel?" "Confused. Because on one hand, it's a relief to know I wasn't crazy, that I really was being manipulated. But on the other hand, it makes me angry with myself for being so weak, for not seeing what was happening." "You weren't weak, you were human, and humans make mistakes. The important thing is that now you're awake. Now you see the truth." 2 months passed. Life in my small apartment became routine. It wasn't perfect. There were hard days. Days when money was tight. Days when Oliver had outbursts of anger. Days when Lily woke up screaming from nightmares. Days when Natalie cried in the bathroom so the kids wouldn't hear her. But there were good days, too. Days when we had breakfast together, laughing about something silly. Days when Oliver taught me something new he had learned in school. Days when Lily hugged me and told me I was the best grandma in the world. Days when Natalie came home from work and thanked me for everything with tears in her eyes. One afternoon, a certified letter arrived. It was from the state attorneys. Inside was a check for $15,000. Compensation for being an indirect victim of fraud. It wasn't much compared to everything lost, but it was something. Natalie looked at the check in disbelief. We don't deserve this. Yes, you do, I said firmly. This doesn't fix the past, but it can help with the future. Use it wisely. She nodded. With that money, Natalie was able to pay 3 months' rent in advance on a small apartment for herself and the kids. She didn't want to be a burden on me anymore, even though I told her 1,000 times she never was. She also bought new clothes for the children, school uniforms, supplies, basic things they needed. The day they moved into their own apartment was bittersweet. On one hand, I was happy to see her independent again. On the other, it hurt that they wouldn't be sleeping in the next room anymore. It's not goodbye, Mom, she told me as she packed the last boxes. It's a see you later. We're going to come visit you all the time. And you're going to come to our house whenever you want. In fact, I want you to come over for lunch every Sunday, the kids insisted. I smiled through tears. I'll be there always. Oliver hugged me before he left. It was quick, awkward, but real. Thanks, Grandma, he muttered. Lily cried. She didn't want to leave. She wanted to stay with me. I had to promise her I'd see her the next day to calm her down. When they left, my apartment felt empty. But it wasn't the same emptiness as before. It wasn't the emptiness of loneliness and abandonment. It was simply the silence of a home that had served its purpose, a temporary refuge that had protected them while they healed. And now they were ready to fly again. I sat in my chair by the window. I looked outside. The sun was setting, painting the sky in oranges and pinks, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. I had lost years with my daughter. I had been excluded and forgotten. I had had to betray her trust to save her. I had destroyed the life she knew to give her the chance to build a new one. It hadn't been easy. It hadn't been pretty, but it had been necessary. And now, finally, we had the chance to be a real family. Not perfect, not rich, not free of problems, but real, honest, true. And that, I discovered, was worth more than any big house or bank account full of dirty money. That was worth everything. 6 months later, the day of the trial arrived. Natalie got dressed in a simple suit we had bought together at a thrift store. Light grey, somber, appropriate for the occasion. I went with her, not because she asked me to, but because a mother doesn't abandon her daughter when she needs her most. The courthouse was an imposing grey stone building. We went through the metal detectors. We went up to the 3rd floor. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, curious onlookers, other victims of the fraud network that Catherine and Marcus had woven for years. I saw Marcus enter in handcuffs. He had lost weight. His expensive suit had been replaced by an orange prison jumpsuit. He no longer had that confident smile. His eyes were sunken, defeated. When he saw Natalie, he tried to hold her gaze. She looked away. Catherine entered next. She still tried to maintain her dignity, head high, straight posture. But the chains on her wrists and ankles told another story. She was no longer the empress controlling everything from the shadows. She was just an old woman facing the consequences of her crimes. The trial lasted 3 days. Witnesses paraded one after another. Forensic accountants explained the transactions. Agents presented evidence. And on the 3rd day, they called Natalie to the stand. I watched her walk forward with steady steps. She sat down, she swore to tell the truth, and then she began to speak. She spoke about how she met Marcus. How Catherine welcomed her with false warmth. How little by little she was isolated from me. About the lies they told her. The truths they hid from her. How she lived in a bubble of luxury not knowing it was all built on crimes. Her voice didn't tremble. Her eyes didn't fill with tears. She spoke with clarity, with firmness, with the truth she had taken so long to accept. When she finished, the defense attorney tried to discredit her. You expect us to believe you knew nothing. That you lived in that house for years without ever suspecting. Natalie looked him directly in the eye. Yes, because that's exactly what happened. I was manipulated, controlled, kept in the dark intentionally. And when my mother tried to show me the truth, I was too blind to accept it. But she didn't give up on me. She saved me, even though it meant I would hate her for it. That is true love. Something you clearly don't understand. The judge slammed his gavel, calling for order. The lawyer sat down. Natalie stepped down from the stand and returned to her seat next to me. She took my hand. She squeezed it hard. 2 weeks later, the verdict came. Guilty on all charges. Marcus was sentenced to 18 years in prison, Catherine to 25. The remaining properties were seized, the bank accounts frozen. Everything they had built with lies and crimes was dismantled. Natalie didn't cry when she heard the sentence. She just nodded. She closed her eyes for a moment, and then she stood up to leave the courthouse. I followed her. Outside under the afternoon sun, she took a deep breath. "It's over," she said. "It's finally over." "Yes," I replied. "Now the new part begins." The following months were about slow but steady reconstruction. Natalie got a better job in an administrative office. She didn't earn much, but it was enough. The kids adjusted to their new school. They made friends. They stopped having nightmares as often. Oliver started playing soccer on a local team. Lily joined an art group at the community library. Little by little, they were becoming children again. Not the spoiled children who grew up in a house of fake luxury, but real children with genuine smiles and honest dreams. Natalie and I became closer than we had ever been. We had lunch together every Sunday as she had promised. We talked on the phone every night. She asked me for advice. She told me her fears. She thanked me over and over for not abandoning her when it would have been easiest to do so. One Sunday afternoon, while the kids were playing in the park near my apartment, Natalie and I sat on a bench. The sun was shining softly. There was a cool breeze. Everything was calm. "Mom," she said suddenly, "I need to tell you something I've been holding on to for months." I looked at her, paying attention. "Tell me. Forgive me for all those years. For excluding you, for choosing Catherine over you, for making you feel like you weren't enough when you were the only real thing I had. Forgive me for being so blind, so stupid, so cruel." The tears finally came. They rolled down her cheeks as she spoke. I took her hands in mine. "I already forgave you, honey. I forgave you the day I saw you face the truth without running away. I forgave you when you put on that coffee shop uniform and went to work with your head held high. I forgave you when you hugged your children and told them everything would be okay, even when you didn't believe it yourself. You are already forgiven." She leaned toward me. She rested her head on my shoulder. She cried like she hadn't cried in months. And I held her just as I held her when she was a baby. Just as I held her when she was learning to walk and would fall. Just as I held her when her father died, as I would always hold her, no matter what. When she calmed down, she sat up. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand. She smiled. A small but real smile. "You know what the strangest part of all this is?" she said. "What?" "That I lost everything. The house, the money, the status, the perfect life. But for the first time in years, I feel free. I feel like myself. I don't have to pretend anymore. I don't have to pretend to be someone I'm not. I can just be. That's the best gain of all," I told her. We sat there watching Oliver and Lily play on the swings, laughing, shouting, being kids. They were healing, too. Slowly but surely. That night, before I went to sleep, I sat in my chair by the window as I always did. I looked out at the city, the lights, the movement, the life that continued no matter how much pain or how much loss. I thought about everything that had happened. About how I had been erased, about how I had to destroy my daughter's life to save her. About how the truth, though painful, was always better than the most comfortable lie. And I realized something important. It wasn't revenge that moved me. It wasn't hatred for Catherine or Marcus. It was love. A mother's love. The kind of love that doesn't give up. That doesn't get tired. That does the hard thing because it's the right thing. That sacrifices its own comfort for the well-being of its children. That love had sustained me during the years of exclusion. It had given me the strength to act when it would have been easier to stay silent. It had guided me through every difficult decision. And now that same love gave me peace because I knew I had done the right thing. Not the easiest way, not the prettiest way, but the right way. My daughter was safe. My grandchildren were growing up with real values. And I finally had my place back in their lives. Not as a shadow in the background, not as a shameful secret, but as their grandmother, as Elena Martinez, a 69-year-old woman who had lived long enough to know that true love sometimes requires impossible decisions. And if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't change a thing. Because in the end, the truth had set us all free. I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath. And I whispered into the silence of my small apartment. I did it. I saved my family, and it was worth every tear, every sacrifice, every moment of pain. And somewhere in my heart, I knew it was true. Now I ask you, those of you listening, have you ever felt like they tried to erase you from your own story? That the people you loved most left you in oblivion? Did you have to make impossible decisions to protect those you loved? Tell me your stories, because they all deserve to be heard. Because no mother, no father, no grandfather or grandmother should be forgotten by the people they helped create. We all deserve to be remembered. We all deserve true love, and we all deserve the truth, even when it hurts. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And always remember, true love isn't comfortable, it's brave.